There is a version of this story most people think they know. A simple story told in quiet classrooms and short lessons. Moses raises a staff. The sea opens. The people walk through, and then they wander. But that version skips the fear. It skips the nights without answers. It skips the voices that shook with doubt, the children who cried in the dark, the mothers who whispered prayers they were afraid might not be heard. This is not the short version. This is the night it truly began. The night freedom was chosen before it was understood. The night heaven stepped down into the dust of the earth and began to walk with humanity. Close your eyes. Let the world fall silent. And come back with me to the night they left Egypt. The night they left Egypt did not feel like victory. It felt like standing on the edge of something vast and terrifying, something with no map and no promise of safety. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. No one laughed. No one celebrated. Freedom had been spoken, but it had not yet been proven. For hundreds of years, the people of Israel had lived beneath the weight of another nation's will. They had known the rhythm of suffering so well that it had become ordinary. Clay beneath fingernails, sweat on backs before sunrise. The sharp crack of commands shouted in a language that was not their own. Generation after generation, born into chains, raised beneath the shadow of monuments built by their own broken bodies. Egypt had been cruel, but it had been familiar. And familiarity, even when painful, is hard to leave behind. That night, the streets of Goshen were alive with movement. Not the loud chaos of a festival, but the hurried steps of people who knew they had only moments. Families moved through narrow paths carrying whatever they could hold. Baskets of bread baked in haste. Small jars of oil. Pieces of cloth tied together and slung over weary shoulders. The elderly leaned heavily on staffs worn smooth by time. Children clung to their mothers, eyes wide, sensing the gravity of the moment without understanding it. No one had slept. How could they? The final plague had passed through Egypt like a silent shadow. From the palace of Pharaoh to the humblest home, the firstborn had fallen. A cry had risen across the land, raw and unbearable, the sound of a nation broken in a single night. Mothers wept in doorways. Fathers stood frozen, powerless. Even the spared trembled, knowing they had witnessed something beyond human strength. But in Goshen, there was silence. Every doorpost bore the mark of obedience. The blood of the lamb had been placed exactly as commanded, and when death passed through the land, it passed over them. It did not enter, it did not touch. Now, beneath a sky heavy with stars, Moses stood at the edge of the gathering people. His staff rested in his hand, the same staff that had once seemed ordinary, the same staff that had become a conduit for wonders no man could claim as his own. His face was turned toward the horizon. He did not rush them. He did not shout commands. He waited. Behind him stood nearly 2 million souls. Men hardened by labor, women shaped by endurance. Children born into slavery who had never known another life. Infants sleeping against their mothers' hearts, unaware that history was bending around them. Then it appeared. At first, it was only a suggestion of light, a faint glow where darkness should have ruled. It did not rise like the sun, and it did not flicker like fire. It descended, slowly, intentionally, as if the sky itself were opening a door. The people gasped. The light grew, gathering itself into form. A towering pillar of cloud, luminous from within, settled just beyond Moses. It was alive with presence, not blinding, not violent, warm, steady, certain. A woman tightened her grip on her daughter's hand. "Do you see it?" she whispered. The child nodded, eyes reflecting the glow. "Is that God?" The mother swallowed hard. "Yes," she said, "that is the Lord." An elderly man fell to his knees, tears cutting paths through the dust on his face. He had been born a slave. He had expected to die one. "I never thought I would see this day," he said, his voice breaking. The pillar began to move, not quickly, not forcefully, like a shepherd stepping forward, trusting the flock to follow. Moses lifted his staff. "Follow the cloud," he called. "Do not be afraid. The Lord goes before us." And they stepped forward. Each footfall was an act of faith. With every step, the lights of Egypt grew dimmer behind them. The stone walls, the temples, the symbols of power that had once felt eternal began to shrink into memory. Ahead was nothing but sand and uncertainty. Children asked the questions their parents could not answer. Where will we sleep? Will there be food tomorrow? Are we going to die out here? Fathers knelt to meet small eyes and spoke words they were still learning to believe. The Lord will provide. Mothers hummed songs carried down through generations. Songs whispered in kitchens and sung in shadows. Songs of promises made to ancestors long dead. Songs of a God who had not forgotten his people, even when it seemed like he had been silent. As night deepened, the cloud glowed softly, casting just enough light to guide their path. They walked between fear and hope, between the world they had known and the future they could not yet imagine. Within the cloud, unseen by human eyes, heaven was moving. Angels watched. Guardians of a fragile beginning, messengers of a plan far larger than this single night. They moved with purpose, guiding, shielding, steadying the hearts that trembled with doubt. "This is only the beginning," one said. "Yes," another replied. "They will learn to trust, step by step, day by day." By dawn, the people had traveled miles into the wilderness. Their bodies ached, their feet were blistered. But something had changed. The weight that had pressed on them for centuries was gone. They were no longer owned. They were free. As the sun rose, the cloud thickened, spreading shade across the camp. The heat retreated. The people marveled. How did it know when to shield them, when to move, when to stop? Moses stood apart, eyes fixed on the cloud. He had spoken with God before. He had seen fire that did not consume. But even he did not fully grasp the mystery unfolding before him. That night, as the sun set, the cloud transformed. Light deepened into flame. The pillar became fire, tall and unwavering. It did not crackle. It did not consume. It burned with a steady power that pushed back darkness itself. Wild animals approached the edges of the camp, drawn by scent and sound. Lions, hyenas, serpents. But when they saw the fire, they turned away. Something in that light spoke a language older than fear. The camp settled into sleep. Angels walked the perimeter unseen. They whispered peace over restless minds. They stood watch over children dreaming of a world they had never known. A young mother sat awake, rocking her newborn beneath the stars. Exhaustion weighed on her, but wonder held her upright. As she sang softly, warmth settled over her shoulders like a gentle cloak. She looked up. There was nothing she could see, but she knew. "Thank you," she whispered. And in the quiet place between heaven and earth, she was answered. "You are seen, you are known, you are loved." That was the first night of the journey. Not a night of certainty, not a night of answers, but a night when God stepped into the unknown with his people and began to walk them home. For 3 days after leaving Egypt, the people walked as if carried by a fragile joy. They spoke of the night they had escaped, of the blood on the doorposts, of the cloud that had descended from heaven. Children laughed more easily. Songs rose in the camp without effort. The sound of chains felt distant, almost unreal. Freedom still tasted new. By day, the pillar of cloud led them across sand and stone. By night, fire watched over them, steady and unblinking. Each morning, the people woke, believing, if only for a moment, that the hardest part was behind them. They were wrong. On the 4th day, the cloud stopped. The people made camp near the edge of a vast body of water. The Red Sea stretched before them, dark and endless, its surface shifting gently beneath the sun. It looked peaceful, almost welcoming. Children splashed near the shore. Women knelt to wash dust from their garments. Men tended to the animals, grateful for the pause. It felt like rest. Then someone shouted, "Look behind us." Every head turned. At first, it was only a faint smudge on the horizon, a thin line of dust rising where the land met the sky. But it grew quickly. The earth itself seemed to tremble. A low rumble rolled across the plain, growing louder with every breath. Chariots. Egyptian chariots. The entire army of Pharaoh was coming. 600 chariots at the front, polished and deadly, followed by soldiers on horseback, spears catching the sunlight like rows of teeth. The sound was unmistakable, wheels pounding the ground, hooves striking in rhythm. The past, long thought defeated, was charging straight toward them. Panic spread like fire through dry grass. Mothers grabbed their children, men shouted orders no one could follow, animals scattered. People ran, then stopped, then ran again, searching for a way that did not exist. Behind them was death. Ahead of them was water. They were trapped. An old woman collapsed to her knees in the sand. "We are going to die," she cried. "Why did you bring us here, Moses? Why did you bring us out just to let us die in the wilderness?" Others joined her. A young man turned toward Moses, his voice sharp with terror. "Were there not enough graves in Egypt? Did you bring us here so we could be buried by the sea?" Fear has a way of erasing memory. Only days earlier, they had walked under heaven's light. Now, all they could see was the army. Moses stood at the edge of the water. He did not shout. He did not argue. His eyes were closed. His lips moved, but no sound came out. He was listening. The people did not understand his calm. The ground shook beneath them. The dust cloud grew closer. How could he stand there, unmoved? Then Moses opened his eyes. He turned to face the people, and his voice cut through the chaos, steady and unbroken. "Do not be afraid," he said. "Stand firm. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still." Still. It sounded impossible. The people fell silent, caught between fear and hope. Moses turned back to the sea. He lifted his staff high above his head. For a moment, nothing happened. The army drew closer. The sound of wheels grew louder. The wind brushed across the people's faces, gentle at first, almost unnoticed. Then it changed. The breeze became a force. The air howled across the water like a living thing. Waves churned. The sea began to roar, pushed back by an unseen hand. The pillar of cloud moved. It lifted from the front of the camp and settled behind the people, positioning itself between Israel and Egypt. The light faded on one side and deepened on the other. Darkness fell over the Egyptian army, thick and impenetrable. They could not see the Israelites. They could only hear confusion, shouted orders, horses rearing in fear. Meanwhile, the wind grew stronger. The water began to part. Slowly at first, then with terrifying clarity, the sea split. Walls of water rose on both sides, towering and impossible, held in place by the breath of God himself. The seabed emerged beneath them, wet and glistening, yet firm. A little girl screamed, pointing. "The water," she cried. "Look at the water." Moses did not hesitate. He stepped forward onto the path. His feet sank slightly into the sand, but the ground held. He turned and called out, his voice ringing across the shoreline. "Come, walk. The Lord has made a way." The people stared. Fish swam within the walls of water. Moonlight filtered through the deep blue, casting beams like light through stained glass. Mist cooled their faces. The sea stood silent, as if holding its breath. "This is impossible," one man whispered. His wife took his hand. "Then let us walk through the impossible." One by one, they stepped forward. Elders leaned on their staffs. Mothers carried infants close to their chests. Children held hands tightly, afraid to look away. The animals were guided onto the path, hooves echoing softly against the sand. Carts rolled forward, creaking beneath their weight. The walls of water loomed on either side, close enough to touch. A young boy reached out and brushed the surface. The water rippled beneath his fingers but did not fall. "I can see fish," he whispered. "Yes," his mother said through tears. "Even the sea is watching." They walked through what should not have existed. Above them, the moon shone through the water, turning the passage into something sacred. Sound was muted. Even fear felt distant. Some wept, not from terror but from awe. An elderly man stopped midway and lifted his hands toward heaven. "Who is like you, O Lord?" he cried. "Mighty in holiness, awesome in glory, working wonders." Others joined him. A song rose in the heart of the sea. Behind them, the Egyptians struggled in darkness. When the cloud finally lifted, they saw the path and charged forward, driven by pride and rage. But the moment their wheels touched the seabed, the ground changed. The sand softened, wheels sank, axles broke, horses stumbled, the army faltered. Fear found them too late. "The Lord is fighting for them," one soldier whispered. But there was no turning back. By the time the last Israelite reached the far shore, Moses stood watching. He raised his staff once more. The wind stopped, the walls of water trembled, and then they fell. The sea rushed back into place with a sound like the collapse of a mountain. Chariots disappeared, horses vanished beneath the waves. Cries were swallowed by water. In moments, it was over. Silence returned. The sea lay calm, as if nothing had happened. On the far shore, the people stood frozen. Broken pieces of wood floated past. No soldiers followed, no army remained. A woman dropped to her knees, letting sand slip through her fingers. "We are free," she whispered. "We are truly free." Children ran to the water, laughing, splashing, alive. Moses stood alone for a moment, staring across the sea. He knew, deep in his bones, that this was only the beginning. That night, they camped on the eastern shore. Fires burned, stories were told and retold, but beneath the stars, a quiet truth settled over them. Freedom had not come easily. It had come through trust, and the God who had parted the sea was walking with them still. For 3 days after the sea stood still, the people lived inside the echo of a miracle. They sang as they walked. Songs rose easily now, carried on voices still hoarse from shouting praise on the far shore. Fathers told the story again and again, acting out the moment the waters fell. Mothers held their children close and whispered, "You were there, you walked through it." The elderly smiled through tears, certain they had witnessed the greatest moment of their lives. Every step felt lighter. They had crossed the sea. Pharaoh was gone. Slavery lay buried beneath waves and sand. What could possibly threaten them now? The wilderness answered quietly. On the 4th day, the singing softened. On the 5th, it faded. The land stretched out before them in endless shades of brown and stone. No cities rose in the distance. No trees offered shade. The sun burned without mercy. The water skins that had once felt heavy now hung nearly empty against weary hips. Children stopped asking questions and began to cry. By the 6th day, the first whispers began to move through the camp. Not shouted accusations, just quiet observations. Concern disguised as conversation. The water is running low. The animals are struggling. How much farther can we go like this? By the 7th day, concern became fear. The last of the water was gone. The flocks bleated weakly. Their tongues hung dry from their mouths. The people's lips cracked, throats burned. Every swallow was a reminder of what they did not have. A group of men approached Moses. Their faces were drawn tight, eyes sharp with desperation. "Where is the water?" one demanded. "You said the Lord would provide." Moses looked at them, his expression steady but tired. "He will," he said. "He always has." Another man laughed bitterly. "Always has. Our children are crying. Our animals are collapsing. If this is provision, it feels like death." Others joined in. "At least in Egypt we had water. At least in Egypt we knew where our next meal would come from. You brought us out here to die." Moses did not argue. He did not defend himself. He turned and walked away from them toward the front of the camp, where the pillar of cloud rested. He fell to his knees. "Lord," he prayed, his voice low, "they are afraid. Show them that you have not forgotten us." The answer came, not in thunder, but with direction. "Walk ahead of the people," the Lord said. "I will lead you to water." Moses rose and called the elders. Together they walked forward under the burning sun. Each step felt heavy. The people followed at a distance, hope and doubt wrestling in their hearts. After a long hour, they saw it. Water, a pool nestled among rocks, shimmering in the heat. A cry of joy erupted behind them. People ran forward, falling to their knees, scooping water into their hands. Then they spat it out. The water was bitter, undrinkable, poison to the tongue. A woman screamed and threw her cup to the ground. Even the water wants us dead. Anger returned instantly. Sharper now, louder. What are we supposed to drink, Moses? You led us to this. Moses stood at the edge of the pool, his heart heavy. He closed his eyes again. Lord, he whispered, what do I do? There is a tree nearby, the Lord answered. Cut it down and throw it into the water. As he does, Moses opened his eyes and looked around. Not far away stood a small, gnarled tree. Its branches were dry, its leaves brown. It looked lifeless. A tree, some scoffed. A tree will fix bitter water. But Moses obeyed. He struck the tree. It fell. He dragged it to the pool and pushed it into the water. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the surface rippled. The bitterness faded. The color shifted. One man dipped his hand in and tasted. His eyes widened. It's sweet, he said. Others tasted. Mothers filled jars. Fathers watered the animals. Children laughed and splashed. Life returned to the camp. An old woman knelt beside the pool, tears falling freely. Forgive us, she whispered. We doubted you. That night the camp rested by the water. Fires burned. Food was cooked. But the celebration was quieter than before, more thoughtful. Something had changed. They were beginning to understand. The wilderness was not just a place to pass through. It was a place to learn. As the stars appeared, a young boy sat with his grandfather near the fire. Grandfather, he asked, why did God let the water be bitter? The old man was silent for a long time. Then he said, perhaps so we would learn that bitterness does not mean abandonment, and that only God can turn what is bitter into what gives life. The boy thought about that. Will there be more bitter water? The old man smiled sadly. Yes, my child, but there will also be more mercy. High above, unseen, the angels watched. They saw doubt loosening its grip. They saw faith beginning to grow, fragile but real. The next morning, the pillar of cloud lifted. The people packed their tents and followed. This time, their steps were slower, their hearts more cautious. They walked with less confidence in themselves and more awareness of their dependence. They learned quickly that the desert does not forgive ignorance. The sun burned skin raw. Hunger gnawed at stomachs. Thirst returned often. And with each hardship, the same temptation surfaced. To look backward. It was better in Egypt, some said quietly. We had food. We had shelter. They forgot the whips. They forgot the chains. They remembered only certainty. Moses heard it all. Again and again, he brought their fear before the Lord. And again the Lord responded with patience. When hope ran thin, the pillar did not leave. It moved ahead of them, steady and sure. And slowly, painfully, a truth began to settle into their bones. Faith was not the memory of a miracle. It was the choice to trust again tomorrow. That first week stripped away illusion. It revealed how easily freedom could be doubted when comfort disappeared, how quickly gratitude could fade when survival felt uncertain. But it also revealed something else. God was not offended by their weakness. He was present within it. When they were thirsty, he gave water. When they were afraid, he stayed near. When they doubted, he did not abandon them. He waited. That week ended not with triumph, but with humility. Not with shouting, but with quiet understanding. They were free. But freedom required learning how to trust a God they could not control. And the wilderness would give them many more lessons. By the end of the first month in the wilderness, the bread was gone. Every last piece. The bread they had baked in haste on the night they fled Egypt. The bread wrapped in cloth and carried on weary shoulders. The bread that had sustained them through the Red Sea and the bitter waters was now nothing more than a memory. And memory does not quiet a hungry child. The hunger that settled over the camp was not mild. It was sharp and relentless. It hollowed the body and darkened the mind. Stomachs growled through the night. Hands trembled by morning. Children grew weak and quiet, too tired even to cry. 2 million people. No fields. No markets. No grain. Only sand and stone. The flocks found sparse grass in places, but the people had nothing. The wilderness gave no warning before it demanded everything. And once again, the people turned toward Moses. This time, they did not come carefully. They came angry. "You have brought us into this desert to starve us," they shouted. "Our children are crying for food. In Egypt we had bread, we had meat. Why did you take us from there?" The words cut deep. Egypt, the place of chains, the place of whips, the place they had begged to leave. Hunger has a way of rewriting memory. Moses stood before them, his face worn by sun and sorrow. He did not argue. He did not remind them of the miracles. He turned his eyes toward the pillar of cloud and whispered a prayer. "Lord, they are hungry. What am I to do?" And the Lord answered, "Tell the people this," he said. "At evening you will eat meat, and in the morning you will be filled with bread. Then you will know that I am the Lord your God." Moses repeated the words. Some believed. Most did not. "Meat in the desert," they scoffed. "Bread from the sky." But hunger leaves no room for alternatives, and so they waited. That evening, as the sun sank low and the pillar of cloud began to glow with fire, the air changed. A sound filled the camp, a rushing, fluttering sound, like wind moving through countless wings. The people looked up. The sky darkened. Birds descended. Quail, thousands upon thousands of them, flying low, so low they could be caught by hand. They dropped into the camp, exhausted, covering the ground. Silence fell. Then disbelief turned into motion. Men ran forward. Children laughed and chased the birds. Women built fires. Meat roasted in the open air. The smell spread quickly, rich and overwhelming. That night, the people ate until they were full. Moses reminded them quietly, "This is from the Lord." Some nodded. Others were too busy eating to listen. They slept deeply, bellies full, comforted for one night. But hunger is patient. By morning, it returned. Meat could satisfy a moment, but bread was needed for survival. And at dawn, the promise was fulfilled. A young girl stepped out of her tent as the first light touched the desert. The air was cool, the camp was quiet. She looked down. The ground was covered. Not sand, not stone, something white, like frost, like snow, but warm, soft, shimmering. She knelt and touched it. It was thin and flaky. She lifted a piece and smelled it, sweet. Carefully, she tasted it. Her eyes widened. She ran back into the tent. "Mother," she cried, "there is food on the ground." Within minutes, the entire camp was awake. People poured out of their tents and stood staring in silence. The desert floor was covered. An old man whispered, "What is it?" In their language, the question was simple. "What is this?" And so they called it manna. Moses walked through the camp, calling out instructions. "This is the bread the Lord has given you to eat. Gather only what you need for today. Do not store it. Trust that the Lord will provide again tomorrow." The people bent down and gathered. Baskets filled easily. The manna was light, almost weightless. Yet when measured, each family had exactly enough. Those who gathered much had no excess. Those who gathered little had no lack. A mother broke a piece and gave it to her son. "What does it taste like?" he asked. She smiled. "Like honey bread." Her daughter tasted it. "No," she said, "like cake." The mother tasted it herself, and to her, it tasted like the bread her own mother once baked in Egypt. She understood then. The manna tasted different to everyone. It gave not only nourishment, but comfort, memory, strength. But not all obeyed. Some feared it would not return. They gathered extra and hid it away. They thought they were being wise. The next morning, the hidden manna had rotted. Worms filled it. The smell was unbearable. Moses spoke firmly. "This is what happens when you do not trust the Lord. He gives what you need for today. Tomorrow requires faith." Shame spread quietly through the camp. From that day forward, they gathered daily, except for one day. On the 6th day, Moses instructed them to gather twice as much. "Tomorrow is the Sabbath," he said, "a day of rest. What you gather today will not spoil." And it did not. On the Sabbath, they rested. Families sat together. They talked. They remembered. They learned that rest itself was a gift. Slowly, something changed. Every morning became an act of trust. Every sunrise carried a question. Will it come again? And every morning, it did. High above, unseen, angels descended while the camp slept. They carried the manna, not in baskets, but in their hands, each flake formed by the breath of heaven. They spread it gently across the ground, like a father covering his children with a blanket. They do not see us, one angel whispered. No, another replied, but one day they will understand. It just beans. For 40 years, the manna fell, every morning without fail, in heat, in cold, in rain, in silence. And every morning, the people learned the same lesson again. They did not live by strength alone. They lived by grace. That was the bread of heaven, not meant to be stored, not meant to be controlled, only meant to be trusted. The manna had been falling for weeks now. Each morning, the ground shimmered with heaven's provision. The people had learned the rhythm: wake, gather, eat, trust. Their bodies were stronger, their children laughed again. The fear of hunger no longer ruled their nights. But the wilderness has more than one way to test the human heart. Water ran out again. It happened at a place called Rephidim, a barren stretch of land where even hope seemed reluctant to linger. No trees broke the horizon. No springs whispered beneath the earth. The ground was cracked, lifeless, unforgiving. The people set up camp and began to dig, desperate fingers clawing at dry sand. Nothing. The flocks bleated weakly. Children cried without tears, their bodies too dry to weep. The elderly sat in the thin shade of their tents, breathing shallowly, conserving strength. This time, fear did not creep in quietly. It exploded. A crowd gathered around Moses. Their faces were red with anger, eyes blazing with accusation. Their patience had snapped. "Give us water," they shouted. "You brought us out here to die." Moses saw the stones in their hands before they raised them. "Our children are dying," one man screamed, "and you stand there doing nothing." Another voice rose, sharp and venomous. "Maybe if we kill you, God will finally listen." The stones were lifted. This was not complaint. This was rebellion. Moses did not run. He turned away from them and walked toward the pillar of cloud, his heart breaking under the weight of it all. He fell to his knees. "Lord," he cried, "what am I to do with these people? They are ready to stone me." The answer came, calm and deliberate. "Walk ahead of the people," the Lord said. "Take your staff, take the elders with you. I will stand before you on the rock at Horeb. Strike the rock, and water will come out of it." Moses rose. He called the elders, and together they walked forward. The angry crowd followed, shouting, threatening, fueled by desperation. They came to a massive rock standing alone in the wilderness, gray, solid, unmovable, a monument to dryness. Moses looked at the rock. He looked at his staff. Then he looked to heaven. "Lord," he whispered, "I trust you." He lifted the staff and struck the rock with all his strength. The sound echoed across the desert. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then a crack appeared, then another, and suddenly water burst forth. Not a trickle, not a stream, a torrent. A river exploded from the stone, clear and cold and alive. The crowd froze. Then chaos turned to awe. People ran forward, falling to their knees, cupping water in trembling hands. They drank greedily. They splashed it over their faces. Mothers lifted their children to the flow. Fathers filled every jar they could find. Animals pushed forward, drinking deeply. Life returned in an instant. A man collapsed to the ground, sobbing. "Forgive me," he cried. "I doubted you. I was ready to kill, and you gave us life." Moses stood beside the rock, tears streaming down his face. He had been moments from death at the hands of his own people, and yet God had not abandoned him. God had not abandoned them. A young girl approached Moses, holding a cup of water. "Here," she said softly, "you must be thirsty too." Moses took the cup, drank, and smiled. "Thank you, child." That night, the camp was quiet, not with fear, with shame. The people knew what they had nearly done. They had threatened the man who had led them through the sea, who had prayed for them again and again. One by one, they came to Moses. They knelt before him. "Forgive us," they said. Moses placed his hand on each head. "I forgive you," he said. "And more importantly, the Lord forgives you. Do not forget this day." Wed stood. The water continued to flow through the night, a living river where death had waited. A father sat beside the stream with his son. "How did the water get inside the rock?" the boy asked. The father shook his head. "I do not think the water was inside the rock," he said. "Then where did it come from?" "From God," he spoke, and the rock obeyed. The boy thought for a moment. "Can God make water come from anything?" The father smiled. "I believe he can." With Aetius, high above, angels watched in silence. One spoke softly. "They tested the Lord today." Another answered, "And yet he gave them water." A third, older and wiser, said quietly, "That is who he is. Even when struck, he gives life." The people named the place Massah and Meribah, meaning testing and quarreling, because there they had tested the Lord, and there he had shown mercy. They moved on the next day. The rock remained behind them, water still flowing, a testimony etched into stone. They would not forget it, and neither would heaven. From the very first night they left Egypt, it had been there, not behind them, not above them at a distance. Before them, a pillar that did not rush, yet never lagged behind, a presence that seemed to know exactly how fast a frightened people could move. By day, it appeared as a towering cloud, thick and white, rising into the sky like a living mountain. By night, it became fire, glowing with a steady light that neither flickered nor faded. At first, the people watched it with awe. They pointed, they whispered, they told their children, "Look, that is how we know where to go." But as days turned into weeks, awe slowly turned into familiarity. The pillar became part of life, like the rising sun or the setting stars. It was always there, and because it was always there, they did not always notice how much it was doing. During the day, the desert sun was relentless. It beat down on sand and stone until the ground burned the soles of unprotected feet. Men who strayed too far from shade collapsed from heat. Animals that wandered alone did not return. But wherever the cloud moved, the air changed. The temperature dropped. The heat softened. A coolness spread beneath its shadow, gentle and unmistakable. Mothers laid their infants down beneath the cloud, and the children slept peacefully. The elderly rested without fear of the sun stealing what strength they had left. The cloud was not only leading them, it was shielding them. One afternoon, a young boy chased a small lizard beyond the edge of the camp, laughing, focused only on the movement ahead of him. He did not notice how far he had gone. Then, the cloud was no longer above him. The heat struck like a wall. His breath caught, his skin burned. He stumbled and fell to his knees, unable to cry out. And then the shadow returned. The cloud shifted, stretching outward, covering him. The heat lifted instantly. The boy lay still, gasping, staring up at the cloud above him. He whispered a single word, "Thank you." That night, he told his mother what had happened. She held him close, her voice shaking. "The Lord sees you," she said, "even when you wander." At night, the fire did more than give light. The desert grew bitterly cold after sunset. Temperatures dropped quickly. The wind howled across open ground, slipping beneath tents and blankets. But the pillar of fire radiated warmth across the camp. Families gathered near its edges, careful not to cross the boundary, feeling heat press gently against their faces. No tent was left in darkness, and the fire guarded them. The wilderness was filled with creatures that hunted by night: lions, hyenas, jackals, serpents. Drawn by the scent of animals and people, they prowled the edges of the camp, but they never crossed the light. They circled, they growled, they waited, and then they left. One night, a young shepherd stood watch near the far edge of the camp. His flock shifted uneasily, sensing something unseen. He heard a low growl and turned. A lion crouched in the darkness, muscles coiled, eyes glowing. The shepherd froze. The fire flared. Not violently, not dramatically, just enough. The lion recoiled. It snarled once, then turned and vanished into the night. The shepherd dropped to his knees. trembling. "You saved me," he whispered. The fire did not answer. It simply burned. As weeks passed, the people began to notice patterns. When the pillar stopped, they stopped. When it moved, they moved. It did not matter if they had just settled in. It did not matter if the children were exhausted or the elders weary. When the cloud lifted and moved forward, the people packed their tents and followed. At first, some grumbled. "Why now? We just arrived. It's 70. Can we not rest a little longer?" Moses would answer calmly, "The Lord knows the way. We do not." Sometimes the pillar remained in one place for many days. The people would build fires, let children play, repair tents, breathe. Then, without warning, it would move again. Other times, it stayed only a single night. Years later, they would understand why. There were places the pillar avoided, valleys where enemies camped, regions where the ground was poisoned, paths where storms were forming beyond sight. The pillar always knew. One evening, an old woman sat outside her tent, watching the fire. Her granddaughter sat beside her, legs crossed, chin resting in her hands. "Grandmother," the girl asked, "why does the fire never go out?" The old woman smiled. "Because God never sleeps. Does he not get tired?" "No, my child, he does not grow weary. He watches over us always." The girl thought for a moment. "Do you think the fire knows my name?" Tears filled the old woman's eyes. She pulled her granddaughter close. "Yes," she said softly, "I believe he does." High within the pillar, unseen, angels listened. One turned to another. She spoke to him. "Yes," the other replied, and he heard. The pillar did not only guide their direction, it shaped their trust. When fear rose, they looked to the cloud. When cold pressed in, they looked to the fire. When doubt whispered that God had abandoned them, they only had to lift their eyes. He was still there, day after day, night after night, through hunger and provision, through anger and mercy, through rebellion and forgiveness. The pillar never left. It did not abandon them when they complained. It did not withdraw when they doubted. It did not flicker when they failed. It remained. And slowly, something changed within the people. They began to follow without demanding explanation. They learned to trust movement they did not understand, to rest when told to rest, to walk when told to walk. They were learning obedience not through fear, but through presence. One night, a little girl whispered toward the fire, "Good night, God." High above, angels smiled. "She knows," one said. "Yes," another replied. "She has always known." The pillar continued, a constant in a life filled with uncertainty, a reminder that the journey was not random, a promise that even in the wilderness, they were not alone. And though they did not yet know it, the pillar was preparing them for a day when it would no longer lead them from the outside. One day, God would guide them from within. But for now, the cloud by day and fire by night was enough. It led them. It guarded them. It stayed. 3 months had passed since the night they left Egypt. 3 months of walking, of manna falling each morning, of water flowing from stone, of a pillar that never failed to rise or burn. And now they stood at the base of a mountain. Mount Sinai rose before them like a throne carved from the earth itself, dark, immovable, wrapped in smoke and fire. The ground trembled beneath their feet. Thunder rolled across the sky without warning. Lightning split the clouds, and the sound of a trumpet grew louder and louder until the people covered their ears and cried out. "Do not let God speak to us," they begged Moses. "We will die." Moses climbed the mountain alone. For 40 days and 40 nights he remained there, wrapped in cloud and flame. The people waited below, afraid and uncertain, watching the mountain burn. When Moses returned, his face was different. He carried 2 tablets of stone, heavy with meaning, written by the finger of God, the law, the covenant. Words meant not to crush them, but to shape them. But Moses brought more than commandments. He brought a revelation. The Lord had spoken to him on the mountain and said something no one expected. "Let them make me a sanctuary," God said, "that I may dwell among them." The people had known God as power, as deliverer, as protector. Now he was offering something else, Presence, not distant, not occasional, permanent. Moses gathered the people and told them everything the Lord had commanded. A tabernacle, a dwelling place, a holy tent where God himself would live among them. The camp fell silent. God did not ask for stone walls. He did not demand gold towers. He asked for willing hearts. "Let everyone whose heart is moved bring an offering to the Lord," Moses said. And the people responded. They brought gold earrings and bracelets, necklaces and rings. They brought silver and bronze, fine linen, yarn dyed blue and purple and scarlet, acacia wood from the few trees that grew in the wilderness, animal skins prepared with care. Women brought mirrors made of polished bronze. One woman hesitated, tears filling her eyes. "This was my mother's," she said softly. "But if it can be used for the Lord's dwelling, it is worth more than my reflection." Men skilled in craftsmanship stepped forward. Bezalel and Oholiab, filled with wisdom and understanding, led the work. Their hands moved with purpose. Every measurement mattered, every detail carried meaning. For months, the camp became a place of building. Hammers rang, fabric was woven, wood was carved, gold was shaped. Children watched their parents work and asked questions. "What are you making?" "A home for God," their parents answered. The tabernacle rose slowly. An outer courtyard surrounded by linen curtains held up by bronze pillars. Inside stood the altar of burnt offering, where sacrifices would be made. Nearby was the bronze basin, where priests would wash before serving. Beyond that stood the tent itself. Its wooden frames were overlaid with gold and covered with layers of fabric, blue, purple, scarlet. Above it all, protective coverings of skin shielded it from sun and rain. Inside the holy place stood 3 sacred objects. The golden lampstand, with 7 branches, burning continually. The table of showbread, holding 12 loaves representing the tribes of Israel. The altar of incense, where fragrance rose before the Lord. And beyond a veil embroidered with cherubim lay the most holy place, the Holy of Holies. Inside it stood the Ark of the Covenant, a chest made of acacia wood covered in pure gold. Within it were the tablets of the law, and above it rested the mercy seat, flanked by 2 cherubim with wings outstretched. It was there, between the cherubim, that God would dwell. The day the tabernacle was completed, the entire camp gathered. No one spoke. The pillar of cloud, which had stood at a distance, began to move. Slowly, gently, it descended. The cloud entered the courtyard. It moved over the tent, and then it settled. The glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle so completely that Moses himself could not enter. Light flooded the space. The air grew thick with presence. The ground trembled. The people fell to their faces. A sound rose from the camp, not shouting, not fear. Worship. He is here. He is with us. God dwells among us. From that day forward, the tabernacle stood at the center of the camp. Wherever the people went, the tabernacle went with them. When the cloud lifted from it, they knew it was time to move. When it settled, they made camp. At night, the pillar of fire stood over the tabernacle, its light reaching every tent. Families slept in peace, knowing God was near. One evening, a young priest named Eleazar stood outside the tabernacle, staring at the fire above it. "Lord," he whispered, "why do you choose to live in a tent?" In his heart, he felt the answer. "Because I love you. Because I want to be close to you. Because you are my people, and I am your God." Eleazar fell to his knees and wept. The tabernacle was not just a structure. It was a promise that God would not abandon his people, that even in the wilderness, even in uncertainty, even in failure, he would remain with them. Not ahead only, not above only, but among them, and the people would never be the same. The scriptures tell us that the people of Israel wandered in the wilderness for 40 years. They tell us about the manna, the water from the rock, the law, the tabernacle. But 40 years is not a paragraph. It is thousands of mornings, thousands of nights, thousands of ordinary moments strung together in a place where life should not have lasted. 2 million people lived in a desert. No cities, No hospitals, no farms, and yet they survived. Not because of a single great miracle, but because of countless small ones. The first miracle was their clothing. Year after year, the same garments covered their bodies. Tunics woven in Egypt, sandals strapped on the night of escape, cloaks carried across the sea. They should have torn, they should have worn thin. They should have fallen apart beneath sun, sand, and stone. They did not. Mothers noticed first. A woman would lift her son's tunic, the same one he had worn since childhood, and realize it still fit. As he grew taller, the fabric lengthened. As his shoulders widened, the seams held. The sandals on his feet bent and flexed, but never broke. An old man held up his robe one morning and laughed softly. "No holes," he said, "no tears. In the desert, nothing lasts, except what God sustains." The second miracle was their health. 2 million people living close together should have been a breeding ground for disease. Cuts should have festered, fevers should have spread, children should have died young, the elderly should have grown weak and frail. They did not. Wounds healed quickly. Strength returned faster than it should have. Mothers gave birth to healthy children who cried loudly and grew strong. The elderly walked farther than they ever had in Egypt. A grandmother straightened her back one morning and smiled. "My joints no longer ache," she said. "I feel young again." There were no doctors, no medicines, only mercy. The third miracle was the manna itself. Yes, it fell every morning. That much is known. But what is rarely spoken of is how it met the people where they were. It did not taste the same to everyone. To a child, it tasted sweet, like honey. To a young man, it tasted like fresh bread. To an old woman, it tasted like the porridge her mother once made. The manna fed more than hunger. It comforted grief. It restored memory. It reminded the people that they were known. A widow tasted it one morning and wept, not from sorrow, but from remembrance. "The Lord remembers my mother," she whispered. "He remembers me." The manna could be baked, boiled, ground, shaped. It was enough, always enough. No matter how many mouths waited inside a tent, no one went hungry. The fourth miracle was the wind. In the wilderness, wind can be deadly. It drives sand into eyes and lungs. It feeds storms that bury camps without warning. But the wind around Israel behaved differently. Smoke from cooking fires never filled their tents. It drifted away, guided gently. Sandstorms rose in the distance, dark and roaring. But when they reached the edge of the camp, they stopped. One man stood watching a wall of sand rage just beyond the boundary. Where he stood, the air was calm. "The shadow of the Almighty," an elder said beside him. "That is where we stand." The fifth miracle was protection from creatures. The desert was alive with venom and hunger, snakes, scorpions, spiders, creatures that kill quickly and without warning. They did not enter the camp. At night, they approached the firelight, sensing warmth, sensing life, but they stopped at an invisible line and turned away. A boy woke one night and saw a scorpion near the entrance of his tent. Its tail was raised, its body still. Then it turned and crawled away. His father pulled him close. "Even they obey," he whispered. The sixth miracle was the children. During those 40 years, an entire generation was born. Children who never saw Egypt, who never knew chains, who never heard the crack of whips. To them, manna was not a miracle. It was breakfast. The cloud was not a mystery. It was direction. The fire was not fearsome. It was comfort. They grew up believing not because they were told to, but because they lived inside faith every day. One evening, a father sat with his young son beneath the stars. "Father," the boy asked, "what was Egypt like?" The man was quiet for a long time. "It was beautiful," he said finally, "and cruel. Do you miss it?" The father looked toward the pillar of fire glowing above the tabernacle. "No," he said, "I do not miss slavery." The seventh miracle was their rest. Every seventh day, the manna did not fall, and the people did not gather. They rested, truly rested. They sat with their families. They sang, they prayed, they remembered. In a land that demanded survival every hour, God insisted on rest, not as a reward, as a command. The eighth miracle was guidance. The pillar never led them into danger. It avoided enemy camps they did not know existed. It steered them away from poisoned ground. It moved before storms formed. The people often complained about its timing, but years later, they would understand. The ninth miracle was forgiveness. Again and again, the people failed. They complained, they doubted, they rebelled, and yet the manna kept falling, the water kept flowing, the cloud remained. God did not withdraw because of their weakness. He stayed because of it. The 10th miracle was presence. Every night, angels walked the edges of the camp. They whispered peace over restless sleepers. They turned danger aside before it could be seen. Most people never noticed. But one night, a young priest on watch saw shapes moving through the darkness, tall, luminous, silent. "How many of you are there?" he whispered. "More than you can count," came the answer, and then they were gone. These were the miracles no one recorded. No thunder, no shouting, no walls of water, just life sustained in a place of death. Morning after morning, night after night, the people woke to fresh clothing. They walked in strength, they slept in safety, and slowly, without realizing it, they learned something deeper than survival. God was not a visitor. He was a constant. He did not only act in moments of crisis, he worked in the ordinary. The real miracle of the wilderness was not that they crossed the sea. It was that they lived. And the same God who carried them through those unnoticed days was still at work, still sustaining, still present. Even now, the people of Israel believed they walked through the wilderness alone. They saw Moses. They followed the cloud. They gathered manna. But there was another presence moving among them, one that rarely announced itself, one that did not need to be seen to be real. The angels were there. From the first night they left Egypt until the final step into the promised land, heaven never stopped watching. The angels did not travel in formation. They did not stand in ranks for human eyes. They moved like breath, like light, like thought itself. Most of the people never saw them, but they felt them. A mother would wake in the night, heart racing for no clear reason, and then feel a calm settle over her chest like a warm blanket. Her child, restless moments before, would fall asleep in her arms. She would whisper into the darkness, "Thank you." She did not know who heard her, but someone did. There was a young boy who wandered too far from the camp one afternoon. He had been chasing a small animal, laughing, careless, until he looked up and realized everything around him looked the same. Sand, rock, sky. Panic tightened his chest. He called for his parents, but the wind carried his voice away. He ran, then stopped, then ran again, until exhaustion forced him to collapse. He cried out, "God, help me!" And then he heard a voice, calm and steady. "Stand up, child. Follow me." The boy lifted his head. A man stood a short distance away, tall, dressed in white. His presence felt warm, familiar, safe. "Who are you?" the boy asked. The man smiled gently. "A friend." They walked together without speaking. The boy did not feel afraid. He did not question how the stranger knew the way. Soon, the lights of the camp appeared. The boy turned to thank the man. He was gone. When the boy returned, his parents wept and held him close. "A man brought me home," he said. "What man?" his father asked. "He wore white," the boy replied, and his eyes shone. The parents looked at one another and said nothing. They knew. There was an old widower who lived at the edge of the camp. He had no family left. His tent was quiet. His nights were long. One evening, as he ate his portion of manna, a stranger approached and asked to sit with him. They ate together in silence. "You are not forgotten," the stranger said suddenly. The old man's hands trembled. "Sometimes I feel invisible." The stranger placed a hand on his shoulder. "The Lord sees you. He knows your name." Tears streamed down the old man's face. When he looked up again, the stranger was gone. That night, the old man slept deeply for the first time in years. At the edges of the camp, the angels stood watch. They walked the perimeter when the people slept. They stood between wild animals and sleeping children. Lions circled but never crossed the firelight. Serpents slithered close, then turned away. When enemy scouts crept near, hoping to spy on the camp, confusion overtook them. Their eyes failed them, their sense of direction vanished. They returned to their leaders with stories that made no sense. Storms formed beyond the horizon. The angels stood in the clouds and redirected the winds. Rain fell around the camp, but not upon it. Lightning flashed elsewhere. Inside the camp, the people slept peacefully, unaware. There was a night when a young priest named Ithamar kept watch near the tabernacle. The camp was silent. The pillar of fire burned steadily. Then he saw movement. Figures, tall and faintly glowing, passed between the tents. He rubbed his eyes. Certain fatigue was playing tricks on him. But they remained. One approached him. "Do not be afraid," the figure said. "We are servants of the Most High." "How many of you are there?" Ithamar whispered. "More than you can count." Rotation, with Macenes. Then they were gone. From that night forward, Ithamar never felt alone. The angels did not interfere with every hardship. They did not remove all fear. They did not prevent every consequence. But they ensured the people were never abandoned. When the people rebelled, angels watched with sorrow. When the people repented, angels rejoiced. They strengthened the weary. They steadied the frightened. They whispered courage when voices trembled. They carried prayers upward. They guarded what God loved. The angels were present when manna fell. They were present when water burst from rock. They were present when the tabernacle filled with glory. They would be present when judgment came. They would be present when mercy followed. The people did not build monuments to them. They did not sing songs about them. But heaven recorded every moment. The wilderness was not empty. It was full of unseen movement, full of protection, full of care. And just as the angels walked among the people then, they walk among God's people still. Unseen, unannounced, unfailing. This was the truth the wilderness held. They were never alone, not for a single night. For all the miracles they had witnessed, the people of Israel still struggled with one thing: trust. It should have been easy. They had watched Egypt crumble under 10 plagues. They had walked through the Red Sea on dry ground. They had eaten manna every morning and drunk water from solid rock. And yet, when the moment came to step fully into what God promised, fear rose again. They stood at the edge of the promised land, Kadesh Barnea, the border between wilderness and fulfillment. Moses called 12 men, one from each tribe. "Go," he said, "explore the land, see what it is like, see if the people are strong or weak, bring back a report." The men were gone for 40 days. The camp waited. When the spies returned, they carried proof in their hands. A single cluster of grapes so large it took 2 men to carry it on a pole. The land was rich, the soil was fertile, the promise was real. Caleb stepped forward first. His voice was steady, his eyes were bright. "The land is exactly as the Lord said," he declared. "Let us go up at once and take possession. We can do it." Hope stirred. But then another voice spoke. "We cannot," one of the spies said. "The people are strong, the cities are fortified. We saw giants there." Fear spread quickly. "We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes," another added. The camp fell silent. Murmurs turned to shouting. "Why did God bring us here to die? Our children will be taken." Rees 10 says, "We should choose a leader and return to Egypt." Moses and Aaron fell face down. Caleb and Joshua tore their clothes. "If the Lord is pleased with us, he will give us the land," they cried. "Do not be afraid." But the people would not listen. They picked up stones, and then the glory of the Lord appeared. A light filled the tabernacle. The ground trembled. The voices stopped. God spoke. "How long will these people refuse to believe me?" Moses pleaded. "Forgive them," he begged. "They are afraid." And God answered, "I have forgiven them." But forgiveness did not erase consequence. "Not one of this generation will enter the land," God said. "You will wander in the wilderness for 40 years, 1 year for every day the land was explored." The camp was devastated. An entire generation would die without seeing what they feared to trust. Some tried to undo their mistake. "We will go now," they said. "We will fight." Moses warned them, "The Lord is not with you." Differed. They went anyway. They were defeated. That night, the camp was silent. No songs, no laughter, only grief. A father sat with his young son beneath the stars. "Will you see the land, father?" the boy asked. The man swallowed hard. "No, my son, but you will." "But why not you?" "Because I looked at giants instead of God." The manna still fell the next morning. The cloud still moved. The fire still burned. God did not abandon them. He waited. For 40 years, the people wandered. One by one, the faithless generation died. They were buried in the sand. Their names faded from memory, but not from God. And as they died, something else happened. A new generation rose. Children born in the wilderness, raised on manna, guided by fire. They did not remember Egypt. They did not long for chains. They trusted because they had never known anything else. And God watched. He taught them patiently. Mercy did not run out in judgment. It remained, waiting, preparing, because even when people fail, God's promise does not. And the wilderness, once a punishment, became a classroom, a place where fear died and faith was born. This was rebellion, and this was mercy, walking together.